I'm honored to be a part of this, and for the work that your site's doing and your institution's doing and all that. It's fantastic and great honor. So
No,
thanks for thinking of it.
it's an our honor, and really I want to thank you because you know, today is a big day, a great day for us, for Orwell, because you represent a concrete part of our values and of the objective that we have also like company. And you are a landmark for us, and for that we decided to give you this prize. And if you want, we can start with the questions.
Sure.
I want
Go
to
ahead.
start with two quotes from Ezra Pound. The first is, if a man isn't willing to take some risk for his opinions, either his opinions are not good or is not good. The second one is, the only culture I recognize is the one of ideas that become actions. Do you feel represented by these words?
Well, you know, Ezra Pound is obviously a very controversial figure, particularly his time in Italy. But you know, arguably the greatest poet of the 20th century, someone whose poetry I've always been drawn to and admired. Particularly the second quote about ideas into action. And I think ideas, you know, have a certain materiality to them. And if you can learn how to take an idea and think it through and then craft execution around it, you can really change the world. And I think we've seen that very much in the last 10 years, that these ideas, particularly ideas of populism and ideas of nationalism, these ideas of what is the Judeo-Christian West, and now broadening out what is this alliance of liberty with India and Japan and other cultures, that really, I think, reinforces what Pound said, that the culture that really unites is the ideas into actions. And so that's why one of the things that makes this time, which is so turbulent, so chaotic in one regard, actually is such a fantastic time to live in, because the time of new ideas and a new way of thinking. And I think that's why organizations like yourself and your colleagues, your cadre, are going to have such a big impact, because as we can see today, I think we're in a battle of ideas, and whoever can take those ideas and actually put them into action, concrete action, and drive that action, really enforce your will upon things through ideas and through actions, are going to end up victorious in the end.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Mr. Bannon, from Breitbart News management, you have been able to gather an entire political area around a precise identity, stimulating the birth of a new global bipolarism that sees people versus establishment, mainstream versus independent information. Besides November 3rd, what are the other main battles for the final victory?
Well, it's going to be continual battles. I mean, November 3rd, just on the horizon, is one political marker on which will be, I think, the whole 20s. I think the next 10 years will be very turbulent. One school of historical thought is about generational change, and this is called, in this theory, a fourth turning. In the United States, we've had a turning during the Revolution, we've had a turning during the Civil War, we had a turning in the Great Depression and World War II, and this is the great fourth turning in American history. These come about every 80 to 100 years, and it's predicated about how people raise the generations in back of them. It's oftentimes why grandparents and the grandchildren are more alike than their own children, because it's about generational, it's how people are raised. We're I don't want to say in the middle, but we're in the midst of a fourth turning. This is a very turbulent time. The next 10 years, this decade of the 20s, will be ever just as turbulent as the 1920s a century ago. And so November 3rd just happens to be a marker. Remember, Breitbart, I worked with Andrew really starting after the financial crisis of 2008. And I believe the financial crisis, that 9/11 was kind of the preamble, but the financial crisis was the trigger that triggered all of this tumult and kind of chaos we've had. The financial crisis of 2008, the elites' response to that, the party of Davos, the financial elites' response to that, which is essentially to take care of themselves on a global basis, to use central banks to bail themselves out, the hedge funds and the investment banks and all the wealthy people that owned assets, whether those assets are real estate or stocks or bonds. It's not a conspiracy. I mean, they worked in coordination, but it was all out in the public. They essentially used the central banks to inflate asset prices and left everybody else behind, particularly your generation. I mean, people under 40 and really under 30 on a global basis now are no different in reality than Russian serfs of the 19th century. I mean, you're better fed, you're better clothed, you're in better shape, you have more access. You're the first generation to have access to all of mankind's information. You have all of that, but you don't own anything, and you're not going to own anything. You have no ability to kind of generate capital with these negative interest rates. You're kind of on a treadmill that you get a little bit of credit, you get a credit card or a little bit of credit, you get some marginal job, some kind of gig job with no future. It's not really a career. You just kind of go from gig to gig. You never have really a pension plan or retirement plan. You can't save anything. Your savings don't get any real juice to them because of the way that the elites have inflated asset prices. And so it's like in the Hindu religion, samsara, you're just on the wheel. You're like a little hamster, just turning, without any achievement. And you can see this in our demographics. It's the reason we have such late family formations. It's the reason we have children later. And one of the reasons is people have less economic opportunity. I come from a very blue collar family here in America. My father was essentially a lineman for the phone company. He was a foreman for the telephone company, as his father was. They both worked 50 years each for the telephone company in very modest wages, but we were able to have, in those wages, the way the United States was structured then, my mom was a housewife. I mean, she didn't have a job outside the house because running the house was everything. We had 5 children, and all of us went to Catholic schools. We all went to Catholic schools all the way through high school and prep school, and then on to college. And all 5 children graduated from college on a foreman salary. And we still live in the same house. My dad's 98 years old. He still lives in the same house. I think we bought in 1956 or 1957 in the same neighborhood, which is, by the way, a predominantly African-American neighborhood. In the 1960s, when all the people fled to the suburbs, my parents said, no, we're not going to do this. This is our house. This is our neighborhood. And these people will be our neighbors, the new people that move in. And it was a great experience. My point is that in those days, working class people could actually have nuclear families, have many children, send them to private school, right? And could survive. I mean, we never felt poor. We weren't poor. We were kind of lower middle class, but it was a fantastic existence because you had this nuclear family with a father that had a good paying job, right? Although he never had higher education. I think he went to high school as the highest he ever went. And so in that regard, this populism and this nationalism, we're at the very beginning stages of this. Remember, nationalism was tried somewhat in the 20th century, and it was a failure because it had a certain taint of evil to it because it went back to ethno-nationalism and about people's races. This is not about that. That's why ideas are so important. And remember, all men, according to Jesus Christ, all men are brothers. And we're united. And you can see this all the time. I see it throughout the world, whether I'm working with the Hindu American Society or the Republican Hindu Coalition, I'm chairman of that, or all of my work in China and helping the Chinese people be free. We're united by ideas. We're united by spirit. We're united by a common cause of liberty and freedom that we believe in. And it's what I think is the reason Orwell's so important. Right? Because Orwell was such a brilliant and unique thinker that wouldn't just go along with the crowd. He really thought through what totalitarianism was and really what dictatorship is, and particularly the evils of having kind of a dictatorship of ideas and a dictatorship where you only have to think one way. So we're united in that. And that's why November 3rd is a very important date. And everything we did at Breitbart to kind of bring these ideas to the forefront was important. But now we need many more platforms, and we have many, many, many battles ahead. This is a thing that's going to take 10 or 20 years to work through. And we will be one thing or the other on the other side of it. We will either be free people, united in our freedom, in our liberty, or it will be slaves to a totalitarian techno dictatorship globally. You can see that coming. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is the aspect of what one potential future is that. And in Italy today, it's making tremendous inroads. And it's one of the reasons I spend so much time in Italy and focus on Italy so much.
Yeah, I agree. And you're talking about China and from the second half of the 90s, the great democracy governments began a huge work of Sinicization of the West. No? The disastrous duty policy, markets ruined by the import of low quality products, the localization to China, weights and rights of workers leveled more and more towards the Chinese level, almost slavery, no? And politicians and media sold to the money of the Chinese Communist Party. And if that was not enough, today we face the crisis of the virus arrived from Wuhan. It's a great battle, Mr. Bannon. Also in Italy, we are talking a lot about the neutrality of Italy from Italy and China, but with this government we are really risking our future, because I think that they are going to do something bad with the Chinese Communist Party, no? To give all our economy or our culture, history to them for money, but money are not everything, no?
Look, it's the reason I have focused so much on Italy over the last several years since I left the White House. You know, not just the monastery in Trizolti, but actually coming and getting involved, speaking many times with Giorgio Meloni, the Brothers of Italy, and others. I've given, dozens and dozens of speeches and hundreds, if not thousands, of meetings in Italy since I left the White House in 2017. Italy is actually the center of where the fight is. And one is the great legacy of Rome, not just Rome and the church, but what the Roman Republic stood for and what the Italian people have stood for throughout history. You should, when she gave the speech at Davos, if you go back to 2017, within about 72 hours of each other, President Xi gave a speech in Davos, which is the center of kind of this global economy that depends upon the slave labor of China. And you had Donald Trump gave his inaugural address, the American Carnage, which was really a defense of the Westphalian system. It was really a defense of the nation state as the basic unit of which man can get his ultimate freedom. Italy is the center. She said in that speech at Davos on, I think it was January 18th of 2017, he said, all roads lead to Rome. And what he meant by that is just not the power of the Catholic Church, but also the power of what the Roman Republic stands for when people in the West look at about how to govern themselves. Remember, the United States, our form of government was very much modeled after the Roman Republic. Our founders, the founding fathers, looked at the Roman Republic as a model of how free men should govern themselves in a complex country like Italy was and like Rome was as it expanded throughout the world. This is the center of it. Italy is the heart of what this fight is, and Italy can't be neutral. Italy in Rome is the beating heart of the Judeo-Christian West. Remember, in the Judeo-Christian West, we have Jerusalem, Athens, Rome, London, and the United States, Washington, D.C. or New York. Those are the great centers that have kind of passed the baton of freedom. And it's absolutely central. This fight in Italy, there's a new book out by Francesco Gallietto who's really a geopolitical thinker at Policy Sonar, the Institute, just wrote this incredible book called Red Contagion, how the Chinese Communist Party is using Italy as the Trojan horse into the West. Look, the craven nature of many and most Italian politicians, the corruption, the incompetence, is obvious. I mean, it's obvious to anyone. But here's something that's happening much deeper. It's just not that the five-star movement, which started as a populist movement, that started as a new technology, internet movement, that started as a movement, talked about the environment and really talked about the end of materiality and really bonding together in some sort of spiritual brotherhood or some sort of populist brotherhood. It is a disgrace what their leaders have done to kowtow to the Chinese Communist Party. The Chinese Communist Party is a totalitarian dictatorship, but more importantly, it's a model of what the future could be. It's a model of what Orwell warned us against, a complete control of your thinking. The firewall is there to kind of make sure that they hive off all the Chinese people. And as you know, the Chinese people, when they're in Singapore, when they're in Hong Kong, or when they're in Taiwan, Canada, the United States, Australia, wherever the Chinese people have the rule of law and have democracy and they flourish. They flourish throughout the world. They're fantastic citizens. They're great people. They're very creative. They're hardworking. They're family-oriented. They're perfect citizens, right? Yet the Orwellian dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party tell us that they're too barbaric and too unschooled and uneducated to govern themselves. 1.4 billion people, 1.4 billion of what are potentially the most sophisticated, hardworking, intelligent people on Earth. This is Orwellian. And what she and the party at Davos and the elites, the financial elites in the city of London and Wall Street and the global corporatists, right? There's no conspiracy. It's all out in the open. And it's not that they're individually bad people. They're not individually bad people. They're individually people just like anybody else. But the system they have built up, right, is predicated upon the cheapest labor possible. And that labor is to be the slave labor in China and essentially the serfdom of generations of workers in Italy and in Western Europe and in the United States. And so that's what this fight is about. And Italy is the beating heart in the center of that. If Italy can't be neutral. Italy's going to be one way or the other. Italy will either be sold out by the church. And right now, it's pretty obvious. In fact, I'm sitting on a vessel of Miles Guo, the head of the whistleblower movement and one of the co-founders of the new federal state of China. And he is the one that has said for years that the Vatican, and particularly the people in the Vatican, have been cutting secret deals with the Chinese Communist Party for many, many years. He just brought up the other day, he says, hey, look, it's about $2 billion that they've spread to the Catholic Church for this secret treaty, a secret treaty signed by the Vatican with a materialistic, atheistic, totalitarian dictatorship that tries to crush Christianity and Catholicism. It's absolutely outrageous. But no, this fight is the initial battle and battleground will be Italy. And which way Italy goes, which way Rome goes, which way the Italian people go will say a lot about determining whether the Judeo-Christian West has enough belief and enough fight and enough grit to defend these ideas that have been passed down to us for many millennia. And so you're absolutely at the heart of this. In fact, is one of the reasons I'm so honored to get the award from an Italian institution, because you guys are in the middle of this, and it's going to take 10 or 20 years to work through. But trust me, at the end of the day, you will not be neutral. You'll either be part of the basically slave empire of the Chinese Communist Party and the capitalists in Davos and the city of London and Wall Street, or you'll be a free nation, right? Just like the Roman Republic, you'll be a free nation of free men that are making your decision in the alliance of liberty with India and Australia, Japan, the United States, Canada. And so Italy will be one way or the other. I happen to think, and the reason I put in so much time is that there's no doubt in my mind that Italy will be a free nation.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, here in Italy, we don't have a direct democratic system like in America. You must know, for sure you know, that in the past 74 years, Italy has had 66 governments. The last one chosen by the voters dates back to 2008. Our constitution, to avoid the return of the fascist dictatorship, has handed us over to the party's dictatorship. How do you think Matteo Salvini and Giorgia Meloni should act?
Listen, I think they're extraordinary individuals, and real fire-breathing populists and real fire-breathing nationalists. And I think they're incredible, and particularly Giorgia Meloni. I think that she's going to have a tremendous future globally. I think she's a rising star, as I do Salvini. But there's also many others that you see coming up. Look, I believe obviously the structure of the Italian government was kind of made by the Allies after the war to make sure that precluded the rise of a strongman, that what happened in Italy in the 20s with Mussolini and the fascists. Obviously the structure so that it could never happen again. You know, I happen to believe that what disturbs me about Italy, and when I started going there, was the fact that there were so many technocrats that weren't even voted on. Remember, you just had Davos, you just had Brussels would dictate to you, who would actually govern the country. And if you look at the Italian people, particularly your savings rate and the creativity of the Italian people, two things we should take out from modern history. Number one, President Trump yesterday was at a shipyard in Wisconsin to talk about the construction of 10 frigates, a whole new class of frigates that will defend the whole West and the United States particularly, but the West in the Pacific, in the South China Sea, in the Straits of Malacca, Indian Ocean. These frigates are now being built in a shipyard in Wisconsin, 100% on an Italian design, a design of an advanced Italian frigate. In fact, the vessel I'm on today has many attributes of the great design of Italian seafarers and the understanding of Italian design, how sophisticated it is. And so in that regard, you see that. In addition, remember, Italy had this, the whole pandemic. Why the whole pandemic explode in Milan and Turin is because the Chinese Communist Party has put massive investments in northern Italy because of the quality of industrial production, but particularly in fashion. Remember, Italy is, I think, the leader in the world in creativity and design and industrial design, not just fashion design, but industrial design, hence the frigates. It is a country of enormous economic power. It's a sleeping giant. And to the tragedy of the Italian people, particularly the younger people, you've been sold out by just corrupt and incompetent politicians and business people. There's no reason Italy shouldn't stand on its own. Particularly if you look at your banks, one of the reasons your banks are actually somewhat in good shape is because of the savings of the Italian people. So Italy is really a very wealthy country. Italy is a cutting edge. You're the 7th largest industrial power, but you don't act like it, right? You don't act like it because you have a bunch of craven, incompetent politicians that have been bought off by the City of London, Brussels, Davos, and Wall Street. And that's why I think the Italian people just wake up to their potential, wake up to what they actually accomplish in the world and understand that, hey, the guys in Beijing understand this. The reason we had the pandemic is so many Chinese were coming into Milan for Fashion Week. So many Chinese were coming to Turin because they own so many of the companies. And remember, this is not about the Chinese people. The Chinese people, as we've proven in Hong Kong and Taiwan and Canada and the United States, are among the most decent, hardworking people on earth. Right? They're fantastic citizens. They're great partners. They're good people. It's the Chinese Communist Party. But that virus, the first virus you got was their capital and their money and the payoffs they did to politicians and the payoffs they did to the media and the payoffs they've done to the Catholic Church. The Italian people have been sold out by the very institutions that they helped build and rebuild after World War II. So I think, number one, you ought to look at basically, and I think the Italian people have to stand up, the structure of the government. Do we have to play by the rules that were imposed upon us from elements that took place 100 years ago? And aren't we as free men and women prepared to stand on our own and really form a government that really truly represents and in a modern age allows us to go forward with the other nations on the earth? Right now, there's just too many governments, there's too much incompetence, there's too much of spinning on the wheel and nothing gets done. And right now, in the economic crisis triggered by this global plague, by this pandemic, there's a massive economic crisis really driven by supply chains. On top of that, there's a huge financial crisis of which Italy is now, because you guys were so hard hit, is now in the middle of. So no, I think it's I think the Italian people ought to be questioning everything. I think they ought to be questioning every institution. I think they ought to be questioning the structure of the institutions, the structure of the political process. And the Italian people are only going to defeat this totalitarian dictatorship of the Chinese Communist Party, which is basically trying to enslave you through your institutions, through these corrupt leaders, okay, to enslave you for many generations and do it in such a subtle way that you don't even know you're enslaved until many years later when it's too late to do anything about it. So no, I think the Italian people need to rise up. I think the Italian people need to hearken back to their greatness of the Roman Republic and what they created in the Renaissance, everything they mean to the Judeo-Christian West, both in culture, and in industry, and in basic applied intelligence. And so I think it's one of the reasons I spend so much time in Italy. It's the reason I have fought the corrupt Italian political system and judiciary system for this monastery Trizolti. It's been very easy for me to walk away. I have offers from all over Europe and the United States to put the Academy of the Judeo-Christian West in areas either in North America, in America, Western Europe. And I've stuck with the monastery of Trizolti for one reason, that Italy is the center of this battle, right? And it's very important for cadres and people throughout the world who believe in the Italian people, who believe what Italy and Rome means for the Judeo-Christian West and what it means for the freedom of people throughout the world, to bond together and to stick there. So I'm proud that we stuck with Trizolti. I'm proud to be launching the Academy of the Judeo-Christian West there. And I think it's now time for the Italian people to start throwing out, very simple, throw the bums out, right? If you throw the bums out and and restructure your government, I think there'll be better days ahead for the Italian people.
I really hope that also with your academy from Italy can start reunion of the West, starting from Italy and from our culture, our identity. This is a fight, Mr. Bannon, that is also on the media. And we must fight against also against the one-way censorship of the platforms such as Twitter and Facebook, which behave like the Orwellian Ministry of Truth. Do you think that time has come to start a great alternative platform?
Oh, absolutely. First off, besides starting alternative platforms, I think in the West, it's absolutely incumbent upon us now to take charge as people in the populist movement. And you hear Yang, the presidential candidate we had, talking about this, and others. I am proud of being at the forefront of that back as early as 2016 and 17, that I believe we have to, in our country, radically implement antitrust laws. We have to break up these massive tech companies. We have to break them up, and then we have to regulate them. But most importantly, every person in your audience, in your institution, in Italy and the United States, all throughout the world, have to get digital sovereignty. You have to take back you have individual rights in the analog world, right? But you also have rights in the digital world. It is incumbent upon people to get digital sovereignty and get these rights back, and to be able to choose, right, what platforms you're actually going to be on and how platforms monetize that. Now, you're going to have price discovery, and you're going to have to pay for those sites, pay for the use of those sites. But you will have actually the ability to own your own data, to be the owner of your own intellectual property. And to me, that's so important, right? And then you can make a conscious decision as a person of free will. You can make a conscious decision about your digital sovereignty, okay? And I think that's absolutely important. Now, as part of that, because I think, remember, it's the capital, it's the pension funds and savings of the working class and the middle class, and particularly what we call the deplorables in the United States. That's what's created all this. Mark Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey didn't have any money themselves. Some of them started in college dormitories. The venture capital, private equity, and hedge funds, remember, that's all the money of the working class people, of the unions. It's managed by a Wall Street elite. It's managed by a Davos elite. It's managed by an elite in the city of London, but it's your money. It's your money that has been allowed to create these technological Frankensteins, these things that are so powerful now that the Google and Jack Dorsey at Twitter in Zuckerberg at Facebook have enough power that they can dictate to the president of the United States, supposedly the most powerful person on earth, what is going to go on these platforms and what not? Is it going to be flagged or not? You talk about Orwellian, the rise of Silicon Valley and what we've allowed it to do with the capital of working class people, and particularly how they have sold out the underpinnings of freedom and liberty by taking money and getting access to China through the Chinese Communist Party. Remember, they're in business with the Chinese Communist Party. This is the ironic outrage about this. So yes, we definitely need new platforms, whether those platforms are Parler or whether those platforms are alternatives to Facebook. But what we can't do is become a ghetto, right? You can't become an intellectual ghetto. You can't say, hey, because I don't like the way they do things, I'm just going to have all conservatives, talk to myself. I pride myself in every day. I start the day by reading the New York Times and the Financial Times and the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post. And all my conservative friends, so how can you read that? It's all propaganda. I said, but you have to understand the narratives they drive. You have to understand how they think. We can't just enclose ourselves in our own information, kind of a closed system, because we will never then drive the process. It is absolutely imperative, more than anything today, and this is a battle. In fact, it's a war. And it's not a pillow fight. This is a knife fight. This is a war to basically the conclusion of one side wins and one side loses, right? Because if they win, they're complete. Orwell warned us. This is the genius of Eric Blair. He warned us, a century ago, that this day was coming. That's why I'm so proud to accept this award. He warned us that this was exactly what the fight was going to be. And he was absolutely 1,000% correct. And he was criticized for those ideas at the time. And he stood by him. And he was right, and other people were wrong that were considered big intellectuals and understood what was going on in the world. We don't even talk about those people today. They're all forgotten. And Orwell's not. And Orwell is essentially like an Old Testament prophet. Right? He's like Jeremiah or Isaiah or Daniel, telling you what the future holds, right? To almost a 1,000% level of metaphysical certitude. And that's the fight we have today. But what we can't do is ghettoize ourselves and say, hey, because of all the horrible talk and how they deplatform us, we're just going to go on our own little things. And we're going to start these alternatives of Twitter, alternatives of Facebook. That's what they want. That's defeat. So we have to fight back every day. Look, I'm at a part in my life, I could go do anything I'd want to do, right? I do this 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it's the only thing that matters, right? 100 years from now, 200 years from now, like you look back over the Renaissance, we look back at the Renaissance of all the great people that led to the Enlightenment and then led to the ability to have freedom for working class people and for peasants and for serfs. You look back at those people and those fighters, and you understand that they saw something that was long range that they were prepared to sacrifice their lives for. But that's exactly where we are today. That's why people associated with your institute and associated with your news site understand that they're fighting for something that's just not in their own lifetime, but also in lifetimes of many people to come. Remember, it was Edmund Burke, the great conservative philosopher, and talking about the French Revolution, he came up with what's called Burke's dictum, right? He said that we are here in a certain period of time of agents, right? We have a certain agency, right? That's inherent in us. But you're here in a certain period of time. You owe as much, because we always talk about the children and the grandchildren, what we owe the future. Burke said, no. You owe just as much to the past. You owe it to everybody whose shoulders you stand on, that has bequeathed you, right, where you stand today. And at that period of time, you have the ability, right, through human freedom and human agency to make a difference, to pass that on to future generations. And that's what you're going to be judged for. You're going to be judged for, you're going to be weighed and measured on your judgment day. And we're going to be weighed and measured by history on exactly what we do in that period of time. And that's why, hey, I don't care what they say about me. I've had so much libel and slander. I don't care. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all to me. Because you know why? I understand that I'm fighting on the side of the angels, right? I understand I'm fighting for freedom and liberty throughout the world, for people of all ethnicities and all races, all genders, all sexual preferences, all religion, doesn't matter, right? And I'm very comfortable about how we will be judged collectively in the time to come. But it's a war, it's a fight every day, and they're trying to not just defeat us, they're trying to destroy us. Okay, and that's what people have to understand. The stakes couldn't be higher because they're not actually out to defeat you. They want to shut you down. Orwell said this. He told us this. They're out to not just shut you down, but they're out to destroy everything you believe in the remnants of what you believe. It's the reason they're so triggered and insane by Donald Trump. It's what Trump represents. It's Trumpism that they have to destroy. And look at what's happening in our nation today in the United States of America. It's basically anarchy, chaos, driven by agents of destruction, not agents of creation. These are agents of destruction. It's the cultural Marxism. Remember, the French Revolution had many good things to it, right? It did have many good things to it, and it was inextricably linked with the American Revolution. But elements of it were so radical, it wanted to destroy basically the subtext of the Judeo-Christian West, particularly belief in spirituality, and the other thing was the family, the unified family. In the Bolsheviks, right? In Maoist, in the Cultural Revolution, this awful Cultural Revolution in China in the 1960s, exactly the same thing. You see the exact throughput of what Orwell warned us about, because that's what Orwell warned us about, is about what that stood for. And so that's why it's we're living in that today. What you see on the streets of the United States, what you see with these statues, remember what they first said in France in the 1790s and what they said in the Bolsheviks in the revolution of October of 17, what they said with Mao in the Cultural Revolution is you have to take down the monuments first. You have to strip them of their history. Once they're stripped of their history, once you destroy their heroes, you've got them. Once you destroy their heroes, you can set the narrative that everything they know is wrong, everything they know is evil. They have to be re-educated. And that's what we're seeing today. And Orwell warned us about that. And that's why this is a fight, and there's no middle ground. That's why you said early, Italy can be neutral. Italy cannot be neutral, and Italy won't be neutral. You'll be one thing or the other on the other side of this. You'll either be the Italy that was bequeathed to you from the Roman Republic, right? The Roman Republic. Or you're going to be a nation of serfs inside a global manufacturing process, headquartered and driven by advanced manufacturing technology in China, but fueled by slave labor and serf labor throughout the world.
Yeah, you know, Mr. Bannon, when I look to my daughter, Victoria, that she's 7, I think always that we must be on the right path in this war. And today, listening to you, I think that I am a really lucky guy that is talking when a landmark of the West. The West is the place where Italy must be to fight this war. And I know your time is really precious, and I wanna make you just last question. I would like that you talk us about War Room and Voice of America.
The fight over Voice of America is central to what we're talking about. Voice of America is about information. Remember, the Chinese Communist Party, one of the good things they have done in talking about, in fact, I'll pull up the book I just happen to have here. It was written by 2 PLA, People's Liberation Colonels in the 1990s. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. It is essentially the war plan of the Chinese Communist Party. It is an absolutely brilliant book. I recommend everybody always read it. It's very dense, but it's the most important, sophisticated book on military strategy, on the strategy of warfare since Clausewitz. So it goes back, hundreds of years. And it's very powerful. And what it says, in the modern world, war is kind of in 3 verticals: information war / cyber, but information war, economic war, and kinetic war, or traditional military war. They understand what Orwell talked to us about. That information itself, that ideas, in your very first question about ideas into action, that information can be used and can be weaponized into a type of weapon that can give you victory of what you're trying to accomplish. In fact, the book says the least important type of warfare is kinetic warfare. The old way that we thought of guns and ships and armies, that in the modern world, in the digital world, it's information warfare and it's economic warfare. And this is what absolutely so important about what's going on today. It's the reason I do War Room Pandemic, and the reason the Voice of America is so important. It's about a couple of $1 billion institution in the United States, right? That is traditional, had Radio Free Europe, and kind of put the ideas of the West out there for action among people who were captive people at that time in Eastern Europe and in Russia, in the Soviet Union. Well, Voice America Today very much focuses on Asia. And what we've seen from Miles Guo, the head of the whistleblower movement, he was the first one to alert us to this because they kept censoring him. They would pull interviews from him. They wouldn't let his voice get out there. And he's one of the biggest, expatriates to China, saying the Chinese Communist Party is not only corrupt, the Chinese Communist Party has used its wealth. It's used its wealth to corrupt and buy Western politicians and Western institutions. Those institutions being in the City of London and in Wall Street, corporations, and particularly politicians and media outlets. Well, that's why that got all censored. And when you look at Voice of America, and the reason this fight's so important is that the CCP has infiltrated really essentially what was supposed to be something that information of the ideas of the West, of the ideas of Orwell, could get out to the enslaved Chinese people through the firewall. And that wasn't happening. They turned to all this kind of soft news. And so the fight over the VOA is in a small way emblematic of what the entire fight's for, because it's an apparatus, right? Controlled by the state, financed by taxpayers, financed by just the average guy, but used as a tool for the CCP to kind of moderate everything and say everything's fine, kind of Orwell's description of how language is going to be used in the future, right? And so that's why the battle for VOA. And here's the amazing thing. A guy that I've worked with a lot and partnered with a lot of things, Michael Pack, who's a real hero, and he's not a fire breather at all. He's not a Miles Guo or Steve Bannon or some fire-breathing populist or fire-breathing nationalist. He's a very mild-mannered, old-school conservative, right? He ran Claremont Institute. He was part of PBS during the Bush administration. But he went in and with a Sith basically blew out all the top management. Why? Their corruption and their incompetence. And that's why the battle for VOA is one of the many skirmishes or many battles. We're going to have thousands of these in the next 10 years, right? Victory begets victory. You have to have wins. You have to have wins to motivate people and to let people know that we're actually going forward. And so it's a very important battle. You'll hear a lot more about it. And it's really about how VOA became Orwellian, right? How it really was supposed to represent the ideas of liberty, but turned out to be something that basically exacerbated the enslavement of the Chinese people.
Mr. Bannon, I want to really thank you because you gave us your time. You talk about really important values issues that are the most important in this time that we are living now in Italy, like in America, and also in every part in the world, in the West especially. I really hope that we can maybe with our small project be a part of this war into the right part with our newspaper, with our ideas, with our people that every day read and listen our news, because I understand something today listening to you that we must do. It's important to speak, but it's important to do. It's important to be the ideas and the values of which we talk. And I want to say thank you very much, Mr. Bannon.
Listen, thank you so much. A great honor, and you're not a little part of it. You're a central part of it. Remember, things start in very small measures, but can grow, metastasize, and become very big and very important very quickly. Breitbart was a very small, tiny site when Andrew first started it, right? Started with just a few people. It became a power site that essentially was absolutely critical to Trump's election in 2016. So what you're doing is absolutely essential. Remember, this fight is for your 7-year-old daughter, right? And we have a duty and an obligation to bequeath to her and her generation the exact same fruits of liberty that we've been, so blessed and so privileged to have bequeathed to us. And so this fight is worth it. And I look forward to when the pandemic is a little calmer. I look forward to getting back to Italy. I look forward to going back to the Monastery Tresolti, back to Rome, and particularly I want to make sure that somehow we get together and have the real celebration and the real dinner and all that at a time of your convenience. But I'm very honored to be a part of this, very honored to be associated with you guys, and look forward to getting together in the future.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bannon. We are really glad for that, and for sure you absolutely trust in us. We are between you, we are near from you, and we stay in the same path. Thank you very much, Mr. Bannon.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.